Hello, good morning. Welcome to Gaming Insight for Tuesday, November 18th, 2025. I'm Steve Saylor. This is your Sometimes Gaming news show, accessibility news show, or updates about my life. I have coffee in my Gaming for Everyone Braille mug today. Seems appropriate because of what we're going to be talking about, which is the Game Awards Innovation in Accessibility Award. Now, if you stumbled upon this video or you clicked on this video and you were curious about what is the innovation of accessibility category? Why is it part of the Game Awards? And C, why do these games deserve to be in this category? Or why were these games nominated to be in this category? And I'm going to go through all of that. Now, I should say, full disclosure, I am part of the jury for the accessibility category of the Game Awards. I help basically decide on who gets nominated. And I do vote for the winner of this category. I am one of many that are in this category, so it's not down to just one person's vote. Jeff Keighley does not have any say in any of the nomination or the voting process for this particular category, nor does any other outlet that is part of the main global jury have generally any say in this category. Generally, the accessibility jury has the most weight when it comes to this specifically. Now, I should also mention as well, because there are often a lot of folks who are in the accessibility jury that work on games that are nominated. In this year, I do have one game that I did work on consulting wise that was nominated. The way that the rules are for the jury is that you are not allowed to nominate or vote for games you have worked on. You could be able to nominate or vote for anyone else, as long as you did not work for that particular game. So it's up to the jury to be able to kind of to vote for the rest. Now, that's just the disclaimer portion out of the way. Let's talk about what is the Innovation of Accessibility Award. The Innovation Accessibility Award is given to the best game that highlights and creates a big part of their game to be as accessible to as many players as possible. And that can be down to software or hardware. Sometimes hardware can be hardware can be nominated for this category. It hasn't really happened in the history of this category being introduced back in 2020, but for the most part, it is basically software and hardware that innovates in accessibility and pushes the industry forward for accessibility in the best way that game can. And so what is great about this category as well this year is that there is also a web page that will highlight what accessibility each game did. I'll be going over that today to kind of talk about that, and also talk about kind of in my experience of what the accessibility is for each game, because I have reviewed every single one of these games that has been nominated, except for one, but I'll give my thoughts on that in a minute. So let's jump into, let's show what the actual nominees are for this category. Here we go. So the nominees for the Innovation in Accessibility for the Game Awards is as follows: Assassin's Creed Shadows, Atomfall, Doom the Dark Ages, EA Sports FC 26, EA Sports FC 26, and South of Midnight. Now, these are the games that basically the 5 games that have done exemplary accessibility in the industry. Now, I should also mention that normally this category does have at least 1 or 2 potential indie games that are within this category that do amazing work for accessibility within that year. It has been in the past, including one, I think the very first one or the second one. There was a game called The Veil that was a audio only game that was nominated, but it lost unfortunately to I think it was probably The Last of Us that year. No, sorry, it was another game, because I think I was there for when that Veil was the category was part of that. Anyway, so and it has been sort of talked about. There is a little bit of a not necessarily controversy, but there is a little bit of discourse around why isn't there more indie games being present in this category. Why a lot often it's kind of talked about that the AAA games have a lot more marketing, so there's a lot more information about the accessibility that's out there. Plus, also a lot of the jury can maybe only see these games as accessible because it is basically a majority vote when it comes to what games get nominated. And oftentimes, it's been said that these games may have had the best marketing when it comes to accessibility, and not necessarily the best accessibility overall in a game. And I will basically agree to that. There are a lot of amazing indie games that have come out this year that should be nominated. And I would say like probably games like Abiotic Factor, Peak, even one I enjoyed, which was I think it was Treasure Goblin. I'm blanking on the name of it at the morning because the coffee hasn't kicked in yet. But there has been quite a few efforts that have been made to accessibility. And actually, I would probably say if you want a good idea of the indie accessibility, there is an Innovation Accessibility Award as part of the Indie Game Awards that I'm also a judge for. That is also available. If you are wanting to be able to vote for an indie specific game that did well for accessibility, there is also that as well. Now, I would also agree. I think that there should be more games that should be added to this. There should be more indie games that are, or just games that are kind of flown on the radar when it comes, but did extremely well for accessibility because of the fact that they don't get picked up by the mainstream media. And it'd be amazing to be able to highlight those games on the essentially gaming's biggest stage. So I do criticize this particular category, even though I am a jury and I have been a part of the jury since the beginning, and including in the former now former future class of 2020 as being kind of a part of the Game Awards to a certain degree. I would agree. I think that it is a shame that these games don't get added. But I do celebrate the games that do, because it just means that the more mainstream media or the more mainstream accessibility becomes or keeps going, the more it normalized it gets within the industry. I do still feel like that accessibility has taken a back seat because this category is probably going to be in the opening ceremonies or the opening or the pre-show, essentially, of the Game Awards, and I'm afraid that that's probably going to happen this time. It used to be on the main stage, but now it's in the pre-show. So I am afraid of basically the accessibility category being reduced to an even lower level, where it's just here's the nominees, here's the winner, congrats, and then off they go. I hope that never happens, but it is something that I definitely am concerned about. So I do have criticisms when it comes to the Game Awards, this category, and also just accessibility being presented in this industry as is. But today we are going to be celebrating these 5 games for accessibility and talking about them. Now, as far as like any games that I think should have been on here, I've already mentioned quite a few, but even if you talk about AAA, one of the games that I was hoping for was Indiana Jones and the Great Circle. I love that game, and I think it has a great deal of accessibility that was added. Not necessarily the best overall, but it definitely allowed me to be able to play and roll credits on, which is something that is extremely rare. I already mentioned games like Abiotic Factor and Peak being 2 others that are in the indie game category that I think did a great job. I did play a little bit of those games before I even submitted my nominations, and I really did enjoy those games for what they had. Not the best overall, but they definitely had enough in there that I was worth pushing out there as far as they were innovating in their own way for accessibility. There are probably other games that I am missing because there are thousands of games that are released every single year, and I'm not able to play them all, but I do definitely try to be able to play as much as I can. All right. Now that we've kind of gone through the categories, we've gone through my criticism of that, and also potentially other games that should have been nominated. Let's talk about what the games were nominated and what they had for accessibility. And hold on, let me see. My camera okay, there we go. My screen froze for a sec. All right. So this is actually, if you go to now with the website's up and running, when you go to the category for innovation and accessibility to be able to cast your vote, there actually is a link that will go to this page. It has been up and down throughout the past like 48 hours or 24 hours since the nominees were announced. So I do have the page basically kind of just up, thankfully right now. But if you want to be able to go check this out, it is available and linked on the category page for the Game Awards. But let's go through this. Accessibility means reducing and removing as many unnecessary barriers as possible so that everyone can enjoy video games. Each year, we recognize the innovations in accessibility, games that are pushing the boundaries of accessibility and going above the standards to include disabled players. Below are the 5 nominations, each excelling in their own way. First, let's talk about Atomfall. Atomfall is Rebellion's most accessible game to date, built with accessibility in mind to make sure as many people as possible could access the core game experience. Options include configurable text, contrast, and size, one of the only games to scale up to 52 pixels at 1080p. I'll get to that in a minute. This is going to get probably very technical. So I'm probably going to give this in as layman's terms as possible as to why what this game had or what these games had in terms of accessibility. High contrast modes for gameplay and optional audio cues for players with low vision, including a highly customizable audio-based FPS aiming system. By design, the game is colorblind accessible by default, uses unique and informative audio cues, and welcomes a range of players through playstyle presets and customization. There's a strong focus on motor accessibility with optional automation for movement, traversal, firing, and reloading, highly configurable melee and aim assist, and detailed remapping allowing up to 4 keys per action, and choice for whether we should be top Vs. Choice for whether each should be top should be top versus short hold, tap versus short hold. Sorry. The formatting of this page is a bit weird right now. Other considerations include a range of motion sickness mitigation, HUD nav assistance, detailed color customization, configurable subtitles with direction arrows, a setting to choose whether menus should pause gameplay, and more, informed by lived experience expertise from consultants and charities that worked with the team to make Atomfall more accessible. And they do have a page where you can be able to go and take a look at the accessibility in the game from Rebellion. So basically, what does this mean for Atomfall for accessibility? And essentially, what Atomfall did. And then it goes back to what it was mentioned when it was at the only game with text size of 52 pixels at 1080p. Basically, you have the option to be able to increase the text size of all text within the game, and you can set it to a massive size. 52 pixels is probably the largest font size you can get at 1080p. And it's to a point where basically the font size for me personally was so large that I actually had to lower the font size from 200% over maximum to 150%, 200% over default to 150%, just to be able to fit more on the screen so that I could be able to at least still read the text, but not have to scroll around or be able to miss stuff because of just how large the text can be. And that's fine. That's actually part of accessibility, is being able to adjust the accessibility to however you want, instead of just trying to increase the maximum of whatever the option is or the default, just to be able to make it somewhat playable. Atomfall does where it increases the font size 200% larger than the default text size, and the default text size was already pretty large to begin with. So other things as well, it had high contrast modes where it basically would change the colors of the enemies and the allies to a different shaded color, and then also basically inverting the background to a black and white, so it makes the enemies and things you can interact with and also your allies stand out for people who with low vision, who can basically see a bit less than light shapes or colors, similar to me. So being able to see at a distance or even up close who's an enemy, who's an ally based on their color is really helpful. Now, one of the games, basically the reasons why people enjoyed Atomfall was it had a similar sort of navigation technique like Breath of the Wild or even Elden Ring, where the world is just presented to you and you have to try to just figure out as you go, and just by exploring the world and learning through environmental storytelling. This game does a great job at that. But also Rebellion recognized that not a lot of players are physically able to explore as well as other players can. So they do have the options within the difficulty settings, but also within the settings themselves to be able to reveal a little bit more of the world that through traditional open world navigation, whether it's quest icons on the HUD or on the map, or just a little bit more knowledge, so that you can direct you to where you need to go. You can have that as much as you like, or as little as you'd like, or completely none at all if you just want the default sort of play setting. So that is something that I think that Atomfall did extremely well. Another thing that they did extremely well, that they kind of took ideas from in other areas of the industry, was in regards to its FPS FPS shooting. So for blind players, whenever you're trying to be able to like you play an FPS game, it's hard to be able to know where the enemies are, or even just in the environment where the enemies are in general, so that you can be able to either sneak around them or be able to know where they are to be able to take them out. This game uses the use of audio cues, so it has an audio sound effect that lets you know where the enemies are in relation to how close they are to you as a player. And whenever you're aiming, it has a bunch of aim assist options, and including audio cues to where you're aiming the gun. It has a bunch of different clicks to let you know whether you've locked on to an enemy or whether you're close to locking on to an enemy. This was kind of borrowed from Sea of Thieves, has a similar sort of FPS sort of audio clicking sort of system. And they borrowed that from that and other FPS games as well for accessibility. So that, in a nutshell, is pretty much what Atomfall did that basically stood out as far as innovating within the industry. So let's go back and talk about the next game on the list for the Game Awards. Next up, we have Doom: The Dark Ages. Full disclosure, I did work on Doom: The Dark Ages, so just as a heads up, I did consult on that. It was one thing that I was very, very proud of, and I just wanted to be able to clarify that before I get started. Doom: The Dark Ages is designed to be approachable and accessible, allowing as many people as possible to become the Doom Slayer and wage a medieval war against hell. Combat and difficulty is highly configurable with a wide range of modifiers, including game speed in fine-grained increments from 50% to 150%, enemy projectile speed, parry window, and day's duration, combined with assists like shield throw, seeking, auto sprint, enhanced targeting, and empowered attacks. Visual accessibility was also a priority for id Software, with gameplay high contrast settings that allow configurable degrees of environment desaturation and color overlays. It provides individual hue and opacity options for enemy, hazard, interactable pickup, attack, shield breakable, and enemy leaders and parryable attacks. This works together with settings for parry recolor, text scale, HUD scale, high contrast HUD, pop-up magnification, configurable reticle to create a more accessible experience for low vision players. There's also audio visualization, such showing direction and type of incoming attacks, cinematics intentionally designed for important sounds to originate from on-screen sources, a range of motion sickness toggles, and much more, pushing accessibility of the Doom franchise to new heights. Now, what did Doom have that basically that other games did not? And that I would actually say it had a much more wider range of FPS game accessible gameplay than even Atomfall did. They actually, I will say that there are differences. Doom does not have the same kind of like FPS clicking sounds or audio cues to be able to know when their players locking onto an enemy like Atomfall does, but it does sort of elevate the accessibility of Doom in a way that hasn't been done in franchise history going back 30 years. What I love about what this game does is two main things: is the difficulty of Doom. You can make it extremely difficult, or even more difficult than before, or you can be able to make it as casual of a gameplay experience as possible. But you can also augment that with its other settings to augment the difficulty. When they said when the article mentioned gameplay speed, if you play around with the gameplay speed, you can actually be able to make it slower for allowing disabled players to have more reaction time in order to be able to find enemies, shoot them, or be able to dodge away from enemies, or even parrying enemy projectiles, which you can adjust that parry window as well to even make it more customizable. But what you can also do is you can actually even increase the speed of the game itself, so it makes it even faster than default, and that could even add more difficulty to you. So if you prefer maybe the game speed to be a little bit more faster than normal, but you would maybe like the enemy projectiles to be a little bit slower, so that way you can be able to see them in time, you can be able to adjust that. That is just one example of many of the options you can be able to adjust within the difficulty. And it's the first time that Doom has ever done this. It's the first time that Doom, even in the modern reboots of Doom from 2016 forward, has had this much accessibility in the game. And also as well, the high contrast modes, like we mentioned, allowed me to be able to play and be able to see what was going on, including it highlighted enemies, allies, and also interactable objects, including I can change the enemy projectile effects for the so that way you can be able to find the specifically parryable attack, so that you can be able to dodge out of the way to be able to make it and find that parryable attack to be able to hit the enemy back with that attack. So you can be able to adjust the colors of that as well for all of that. So I in my gameplay I changed like the enemy color to pink to be able to make it a little bit easier for me to see, and then interactables as yellow and allies as blue, essentially, because I found the red was a little too like not as bright enough, but you can be able to adjust the brightness of those colors as well. And it allows me to just basically turn the environment to black and white, which actually I would probably recommend if you don't even turn on high contrast mode and you just turn on the background. You can literally create a chrome edition of Doom if you really wanted to play that. And it's actually a really fun sort of like fun thing you could just do. It's not necessarily a mode like you would see in Kurosawa mode or something like that in the Ghost of Yote or Ghost of Tsushima, but it is a fun sort of thing. You can be able to just turn it into a black and white version of Doom if you wanted to play that as well. And then I had a ton of other options, like being able to increase the HUD size of all the things within the HUD, increasing the text size, including even the boxes, tooltip boxes that normally would be really small. They actually increase the font size of those, which I found to be very helpful. It's not necessarily the thing that innovates the most, but it is something that is very great for me to be able to play. And the reason why it innovated for accessibility is, again, innovating in FPS, much like Atomfall, in trying to be able to make this game more as accessible as possible. It still had a long way to go. There's a lot of areas of improvement, but it definitely added a lot of customization to create the best Doom experience that you want to be able to play. And that is why it is nominated for within this category. So let's go back to this page and we'll see the next game. Assassin's Creed Shadows. Assassin's Creed Shadows is an evolution for the franchise, with many elements being rebuilt from the ground up. The team embraced this as an opportunity to take accessibility to new levels, with franchise firsts like audio-described cinematics, powerful remapping allowing a choice of hold press, double press for each action, and greatly upgraded subtitles with better color modifications, speaker directions, conversation log, and speaker emotion tone tag. I'll talk about that in a minute. Screen narration now goes beyond menu itself to cover many HUD modules and time-sensitive elements. The HUD is highly configurable, letting players toggle every element individually or through presets, and adjust opacity, size, and contrast. Stealth and combat each have 4 separate difficulty settings, and combat can be simplified to a single input instead of multiple buttons or complex combos. Guided and canon modes remove blockers to exploration and narrative 2, and there's a range of extra audio cues with an audible glossary to increase independence for players with sight loss. Bringing together efforts from many Ubisoft teams around the world, all working to ensure as many people as possible are able to enjoy everything the game has to offer. Now, if you're brand new to this sort of category or brand new to the innovation and accessibility of the Game Awards, something you may not know is that Ubisoft is often nominated in this category. They have only won once out of the 5 years that this category has been around. This might be the second time, who potentially, if Assassin's Creed Shadows wins overall, but they are usually like nominated heavily in this category because of the growth of accessibility that they have done since literally going back as far as 2018, when the accessibility really started to be able to be pushed forward from within Ubisoft and having a team dedicated to accessibility. Now, what did Assassin's Creed Shadows do that innovated or that did better than other games? Well, one is that it does actually tie into Ubisoft in general, because Ubisoft, all their teams have been innovating and building out their tools for accessibility across all franchises for the past, 7 years now at this point, 8 years now. And a lot of this is accessibility crosses over franchises. What it may end up in Far Cry may end up in Assassin's Creed, or even recently in Star Wars Outlaws. If you played Star Wars Outlaws and Assassin's Creed Shadows and actually kind of recognize that there's some accessibility options or settings that are similar to each other, that's not But that's not a coincidence. That is on purpose. And what Assassin's Creed Shadows did for the Assassin's Creed franchise is made it the most accessible game within that franchise, including the having a proper screen reader that does read elements on the within the gameplay itself. And it's not the most accessible open world game that there is. We have yet to be able to kind of have a fully accessible open world yet. But there are a lot of improvements in it. There are audio cues to be able to help you direct you where to go, because basically whenever you move if you have, say for instance, an object or a point of interest that you've highlighted or you've targeted in your map, and it's up on, and you have it on the compass. If you notice and you have screen reader turn on, if that point of view icon is in the center of the compass, it will read off the objective that you're pointed to, and it will tell you exactly how far it is away from the player. And when you have a guided mode turned on with your horse, it will actually follow the path towards that marker. So it also does help a little bit with audio navigation. It's not the best, but it did push the franchise and the industry forward in trying to be able to make open worlds a lot more accessible. And yes, there are a lot of customization options for stealth and for combat, making it simpler, being able to only just push one button in combat instead of multiple combos. Ubisoft has been very good at being able to add that. It does have the ability to be able to turn one button into multiple actions depending on how you push that button. It will 3 actions per button, basically. You can remap a button to be, an action, say, for instance, we'll just, as an example, you can remap dodge to just a toggle. You can also remap crouching to a hold. And you could maybe even have parry being a double tap, all on the same button. If you choose B on the controller, you can have a single tap for crouch, single tap for dodge, double tap for crouch, a hold for crouch, and a double tap for parry. You can have that all on the same button, and depending on how dexterous your hand can be, you could be able to accommodate all 3 of those on a controller or even on mouse and keyboard. What that does is that allows you to remap buttons on a controller, so you don't have to use all buttons on a controller. You could just remap. If you can remap 3 actions per one button, it eliminates having to be able to move your hand from one side of the controller to the other, or having to be able to purposely, especially on a controller, use every single button on that controller, which can be difficult for motor disabled players. Another thing that they basically had mentioned is the speaker emotion tone tags in the subtitles. Oftentimes for cognitive disabled players, the tone that is presented, they may not understand, sort of based off of potentially an actor's performance, or just based off the dialogue itself, how they're presenting that tone. And because it's part of deaf and hard of hearing, this also does help for deaf and hard of hearing players as well. When a player is talking very sarcastically, it will put beside their speaker name in brackets sarcastic. And that tells a deaf and hard of hearing player, and also those with cognitive disabilities, the ability to be able to know how that line is being presented if they cannot hear or comprehend how that actor is portraying that particular line, or how they're acting to that particular line. So that is what the tone, the tagging is, and it's pretty much for every single line, I think, of dialogue that is subtitled. And also, it is one of the first open world games and the first Assassin's Creed game to be able to include audio descriptions for its cinematics. That is something that not every game in this category has done before, but it is something that is still innovating and pushing the boundaries for accessibility in the industry. So all right, so let's move on to the next game, which I believe is EA FC 26. FC 26 marked a step forward not just for the franchise or genre, but breaking new ground for competitive games. FC 26 highly customizable gameplay, high contrast modes, configurable color overlay for home, away, goalkeepers, referee close, whole body and ball, pitch to saturation slider, player and stadium shadow toggles, I'll get all to that in a minute, are available in all game modes, including competitive PvP or PvP. The unveiling of the feature was itself innovative, with the high contrast functionality being showcased within the first reveal trailer of the game. The game builds upon the strong motor accessibility of the series, with control customization, including 1 and 2 button modes, analog sprint, an extensive array of assists for shooting, passing, defending, switching, dribbling, and goalkeeping, and more. There's also menu narration, configurable player indicator size and fade, configurable subtitles, and real-time chat transcription between text and voice. Achieving a shift like this in a game that has a 1-year release cycle is no small feat, made possible by efforts all across the studio and informed and inspired by working directly with disabled players throughout. Now, what does this mean for accessibility for EA and the FC franchise? So this is actually the first time that the EA Sport or EAFC has included accessibility that does affect the multiplayer mode within the game itself. Oftentimes, EA Sports games do have some accessibility, but they don't all translate into online multiplayer. Most oftentimes it's either single player or local multiplayer, if that, in order for that accessibility to be able to be available. But in this game, high contrast mode is available in all modes, including online multiplayer. High contrast mode, as I talked about already, it allows you to be able to shade into enemies and friendly players, or basically in this case your teammates and your opponents, into different colors, and including interactable objects that you need to interact with, and in this case the soccer ball or the football itself. So what normally high contrast mode has never been in multiplayer. It's always been in single player. Even when I worked on Call of Duty Black Ops 6 last year, there is high contrast mode in both zombies and single player campaign, but not in multiplayer. This is the first time that high contrast mode has been included in online multiplayer. But what does that do for EAFC? Now, I have played a little bit of this. I'm not enough to be able to do a full review, but I have played around with the high contrast mode within EAFC 26 to be able to talk about this now. So what it does is it basically allows you to, again, change the color of not only the whole players, but the kits themselves, if you need to be able to do whatever color you need it to be able to make it easier for you to see, including changing the color of the players. And you can even desaturate the field itself so that it can make those players and the ball stand out even more. And yes, you can even adjust the color of the ball to make that stand out. And it's available in both, again, in everything, in multiplayer and in single player campaigns. And that is something that has not been done before. That is something that is pushing the industry forward and innovating in that way. And hopefully more games sort of take note and be like, well, hey, if they included a multiplayer, then we can too, because it definitely can help a lot of players. And it doesn't take advantage. It's not being unfair to the other player. They're basically getting the same information that's being presented to all the players. It's just, it makes it a little bit more comfortable for especially those with low vision to be able to see. Now, again, it's not the perfect game. They definitely have a long way to go. But one thing that this article does mention that I really appreciate is that you have to appreciate this as well, is that in a yearly cycle game, an annualized game where they have literally about 18 months in order for them to be able to create the new version of the game, to be able to include this in that short production cycle is amazing to be able to see. It's something that I hope gets expanded upon in the EA Sports franchises and other EA Sports franchises. Now, I know I'm going along with this episode, so I apologize, but I've got one more game to be able to talk about, and I'll get out of here. But let's talk about South of Midnight, shall we? South of Midnight, built upon Compulsion Games, that's the studio, previous accessibility experience, taking it further through extensive work with disabled players to identify new possibilities and set ambitious targets. A flagship guiding strand feature provides a line to objectives, configurable in length, display, time, camera shift the path, and audio beacons with volume and pitch options. Alongside, the game supports informative haptic and audio cues, menu narration, and menu text and HUD scaling to larger sizes, increasing accessibility, particularly for the players with low vision. Motor disability is also extensively considered, with options for faster holds, glide hold toggle, and auto target lock on with adjustable sensitivity. There are skip features for all combat, chase sequences, and bosses, which is also supported by fine-grained difficulty settings that go all the way up to invincibility. The game also includes configurable subtitles with direction arrow and captions for sounds, replayable cinematics, a toggle to remove the stop motion effect, and more. all allowing more players to experience the world and narrative that Compulsion crafted in a meaningful and independent way. So what did South of Midnight do that was innovative for accessibility? Well, one they mentioned is the guided strand feature. It is basically a sort of a highlighted golden sort of, or highlighted silver path to be able to go to where you need to go. There is audio cues to be able to even direct you as to where to go. It's not perfect, but because it does make it difficult for at least totally blind players to be able to know verticality when it comes to the platforming aspects of the game. But it is something that is not often done in a lot of games in this particular setting. But I think the thing that makes it stand out the most is that ability to be able to skip combat, skip chase sequences, and skip boss battles. Now, here's the thing. You may say to yourself, but doesn't that sort of take away the impact of the game? Doesn't that take away the actual gameplay in and of itself? And I would say, no, it does not. If the player wants to be able to experience the story of the game and just enjoys the platforming and doesn't like the combat, you can skip all of that altogether and just enjoy the part of the game that you enjoy, the parts of the game that you enjoy. If you like the combat, but you're not necessarily super great at it, or your disability gets in the way and the combat can be frustrating, you can be able to try it and then be able to skip the combat if needed. Whenever there's chase sequences, there's several chase sequences in the game, and that can be nerve-wracking. That can be a little bit too overstimulating for someone with cognitive disabilities. So having to be able to turn that off is a great option, but also still allow you to be able to try it. And if you are still having trouble with it, there is a button to be able to skip that altogether. Same with boss battles too. It allows you to be able to customize it in every way, shape, or form. You can keep it off and play as the game as intended, or you can be able to just try it out. And if you're having trouble, you can skip right through it, or you can just skip it altogether and just enjoy the story and the platforming that is presented, including the music, which I do think actually was kind of robbed for best score, best music, but I understand. And so I will say that I think that those in and of itself is something that hasn't been done in games before, or at least a lot of developers would be afraid to sort of include that into the game because they think that it would be cheating the player out of a gameplay experience that they want. But I think Compulsion Games, what they did, that was awesome, was that they recognized not all players are going to want to be able to play this in that way. Also, even for kids, if they just don't like being able to play those combat chase sequences or bosses, and they just want to be able to play around with the platforming and just enjoy the story, you can be able to do that too. Now, I'm not saying this is the best game for kids, but I think you get the idea. So all in all, that is what accessibility South of Midnight provides, and is reason why that the game that game is nominated for the Innovation Accessibility Award. And that is it. That is all the games for the Innovation Accessibility. I know this is a long episode, but I hope that this basically answers all the questions that you may have as to why each of those games are nominated in this category. Yes, were there games that were snubbed? 100%. Were there games that I would have loved to have been able to see nominated this year? 100%. But this is like the accessibility being presented on gaming's biggest stage. And as much as I do have criticisms against the Game Awards, Future Class, and this category, and how accessibility in general for the Game Awards, I do appreciate that these games are being recognized for their innovation and accessibility, for pushing accessibility forward. And I hope this is that these games are a beacon for developers to be able to say that, hey, accessibility is important. Accessibility can be important to us. Let's try it, or let's continue moving forward with our own accessibility to be able to make it even better so that we can get nominated either again or for nominated for the first time for an accessibility award. If you have any questions or comments, I'd love to be able to hear them or read them in the comment section down below. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Take care and have a great day. Bye-bye.